Before I begin, if you've ever lived through betrayal like this, please like, leave a comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. My name is Nadia, and for a long time I believed love meant endurance. I believed loyalty meant staying no matter how deep the wound. I believed forgiveness was proof of strength. I was wrong. Or maybe I was only half right. I met Imran when I was 24. I was shy, serious, the kind of woman who folded her clothes neatly and planned her life carefully. He was confident, charming, full of laughter that filled rooms. When he looked at me, I felt chosen, not just liked, chosen, and that feeling, it became my anchor. We married within a year, nothing extravagant, a simple ceremony, families smiling, hands decorated with henna, promises whispered under warm lights. I remember thinking as I sat beside him in our new home that I had stepped into the life I was meant for. The first years were gentle. We built routines, morning tea together, late night movies, weekend visits to family. I learned how he liked his shirts ironed, how he needed silence when stressed, how he smiled in his sleep. He learned how I liked my pillows arranged, how I overcooked rice when nervous, how I needed reassurance more than I admitted. When our daughter Sarah was born, I felt complete. Holding her tiny body, hearing her first cry, I told myself there could be no greater blessing than this family. But life has a way of changing quietly before it changes loudly. Imran started working longer hours. At first, I was proud. He's doing this for us, I told myself. He'd come home late, tired, phone buzzing often. He'd step outside to take calls. He'd smile at his screen in ways that weren't meant for me. I noticed. Of course I noticed. But I also dismissed it because trust is easier than suspicion, because love doesn't want to believe in cracks. Then one evening, everything shifted. His phone lit up on the kitchen counter while he showered. A message preview appeared, a heart emoji, a name I didn't recognize. Something in my chest tightened, but my hand still reached for the phone like it moved on its own. I opened the chat. There were months of messages, flirtation, secrets, plans, photos that made my stomach turn cold. A woman's laughter captured in text, a woman who was not me. By the time Imran walked into the kitchen, towel around his shoulders, I was sitting at the table, phone in my hand, my body strangely calm. He froze. I didn't need to say a word. He knew. That night, he didn't deny it. He said it was a mistake, that it didn't mean anything, that he loved me, that he was sorry. He cried. I cried. We sat on opposite ends of the couch like strangers wearing familiar faces. I didn't sleep. I watched Sarah breathing beside me, her small chest rising and falling, unaware that the world she knew had already cracked. The next morning, I looked myself in the mirror. My eyes were swollen, my hair messy, my face unfamiliar. And yet I said out loud, I will fix this. Not he will fix this. I said I will fix this. Because somewhere in me I believed that saving the marriage was my responsibility, my duty, my proof of love. And so I stayed. Imran promised to cut contact. He promised transparency. He promised therapy. He promised never again. And for a while he tried, or at least he appeared to. I smiled in front of family. I posted happy photos. I laughed at jokes. I cooked his favorite meals. I held his hand in public. I played the role of the woman who had forgiven. Inside, I was different. I checked his phone when he slept. I counted minutes when he was late. I read meaning into every sigh, every glance, every notification. I asked casual questions that were really interrogations in disguise. Trust, once broken, doesn't return. It gets replaced with vigilance. Months passed, then years. From the outside, we looked healed, stronger even. People told me, "You're so mature, you saved your family." And I smiled because it was easier than explaining that I no longer knew who I was without the constant effort of holding everything together. I stopped painting, something I once loved. I stopped meeting friends. I stopped reading novels. I stopped dreaming about anything beyond grocery lists and school schedules and Imran's moods. My world became small, not because he demanded it, but because I did it to myself. One night, Sarah asked me, "Ami, why don't you laugh like you used to?" Children see what adults hide. I hugged her tightly and said, "I'm just tired, sweetheart." But in truth, I wasn't just tired. I was disappearing. Piece by piece, I gave away parts of myself to keep a marriage alive that had already changed shape. I wasn't the woman who had been betrayed anymore. I was the woman trying not to be betrayed again. There's a difference, and it costs you everything. And that was only the beginning. The strange thing about losing yourself is that it doesn't happen all at once. It happens in tiny, almost invisible moments. The moment you swallow a question instead of asking it. The moment you pretend a smile feels real. The moment you decide your needs can wait until later. And then one day you realize later never came. Imran and I settled into a rhythm that looked normal from the outside. He went to work, I took care of the house and Sarah. We attended family gatherings, we took photos on birthdays, we posted those photos online, and everyone said, "Mashallah, such a beautiful family." I learned to live with a quiet ache in my chest. It was always there, humming like a distant machine. I didn't cry often anymore. Crying takes energy. I had become efficient at holding everything inside. Sometimes at night, when Imran slept beside me, I would stare at the ceiling and think, I forgave him. Why do I still feel broken? I didn't understand then that forgiveness doesn't erase trauma. Staying doesn't heal betrayal by itself. Love doesn't magically repair trust. It takes two people rebuilding, but I was doing all the rebuilding alone. Imran had stopped talking about the affair. To him, it was the past. He wanted to move forward, and I wanted to be the kind of wife who could move forward too, so I pretended. One afternoon, I visited my mother. She watched me quietly as I helped her prepare lunch. Finally, she said, "You've become very quiet, Nadia." "I'm fine," I answered automatically. She touched my hand. Fine is not a feeling, it's a cover. I laughed lightly to avoid the conversation. "You worry too much." But as I left her house that day, her words followed me. Fine is not a feeling, it's a cover. That night, I stood in front of the mirror again, just like the morning after I discovered the affair. Only this time, years had passed, and the woman staring back at me looked older, duller, like a photograph left in the sun too long. "Who are you?" I thought. I didn't know the answer. The breaking point didn't arrive with another affair. There was no new betrayal, no dramatic discovery. It came in the smallest, quietest way. Sarah had a school event. Parents were invited. Imran was supposed to come. He texted last minute, "Running late, start without me." I sat in the school hall, surrounded by laughing families, parents clapping, children performing. I watched Sarah scan the audience, searching for her father. I waved, smiling, pretending everything was fine. When the show ended, she walked up to me and said, "Did Abu not come again?" The word "again" hit me harder than any scream. In the car, Sarah stared out the window silently, and suddenly I saw it clearly. This wasn't just my life anymore. My daughter was growing up learning that women wait, women accept, women shrink themselves to keep others comfortable. And something in me snapped, not in anger, in clarity. That night when Imran came home, I said, "We need to talk." He looked tired. "Can it wait till tomorrow?" "No," I said calmly. It waited for years. He sat down, confused. I told him everything, not just about the affair, about how I no longer trusted him, how I had lost myself trying to forgive, how I felt invisible, how I felt like a shadow in my own home. He listened quietly. When I finished, he said, "I thought we were okay." That sentence hurt more than his affair, because it meant he never saw my pain, or worse, he saw it and chose not to ask. "I don't think I can do this anymore." His eyes widened. "Are you leaving?" I looked at him, the man I once loved, the man I once rebuilt myself for, the man who thought survival meant success. And I answered, "I don't know yet, but I know I can't keep disappearing." That night, I slept in Sarah's room, listening to her breathing, holding her small hand, and for the first time in years, I didn't check Imran's phone. I didn't wonder where he was emotionally. I didn't plan how to fix anything. I just listened to my own heart, and it was finally speaking louder than my fear. The morning after I told Imran I couldn't keep disappearing, I woke up feeling strangely light. Not happy, not relieved, just awake, like I'd been underwater for years and finally surfaced for air. Imran avoided my eyes at breakfast. He buttered his toast, scrolled through his phone, asked Sarah about school. Normal. Too normal. As if our conversation the night before had been just another disagreement about bills or chores. But I knew something had shifted, and so did he. After they left, I stood in the doorway watching them walk down the street, Sarah skipping, Imran holding her backpack strap. From the outside, we looked like every other family in the neighborhood, and I wondered how many women behind closed doors were having the same silent conversations with themselves that I had for years. I spent that day doing nothing. No cleaning, no cooking ahead, no planning. I sat on the couch, a blanket around my shoulders, tea growing cold on the table. And I thought. I thought about the girl I was before Imran, the one who painted sunsets on cheap canvas, the one who laughed loudly with friends, the one who dreamed of opening a small art studio, the one who believed love added to you, not replaced you. Where had she gone? I tried to remember the last time I felt joy without effort. I couldn't. When Imran came home that evening, he brought flowers. Apology flowers, the kind men bring when they sense something is wrong but don't fully understand it. He handed them to me. "For you," he said. I looked at the flowers. Beautiful, fresh, temporary. "Thank you," I said, and placed them in a vase. He waited, maybe for a smile, maybe for forgiveness, maybe for reassurance that everything was fine again. But I said nothing. That night, after Sarah went to bed, Imran sat beside me. "Talk to me," he said. "I don't want to lose you." I looked at him, and for the first time in years, I spoke without fear of his reaction. "You already lost me," I said. "You just didn't notice." His breath caught. "I never wanted to hurt you." "I believe you," I replied. "But you did, and then I stayed, and in staying, I hurt myself." He ran his hair through his hair, frustrated. "So what do you want me to do? I apologized, I changed, I stayed, I didn't cheat again." I nodded slowly. "You stopped the affair, but we never healed, we never rebuilt trust, we just covered the wound and called it recovery." He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. "I don't blame you for everything. I blame myself, too, for pretending, for shrinking, for thinking love meant erasing myself." Silence settled between us. Finally, he said, "Do you want to leave?" The old me would have softened, would have said, no, I just need time, would have worried about his feelings, his fear, his comfort. But the woman I was becoming said, I want to find myself again, and I don't know if I can do that here. He looked away, and in that moment, I realized something important. He loved me, but he loved the version of me that never challenged him, never asked for too much, never demanded space to grow. And I was no longer that woman. We agreed to try counseling, a last attempt, a bridge before a final decision. The therapist was kind. She asked questions about trust, about communication, about needs. And as I listened to myself speak in that room, I realized how long I had been unheard. One session, the therapist asked me, Nadia, what do you want now? I froze. What did I want? Not what I needed for Sarah, not what Imran expected, not what society praised. What did I want? Tears filled my eyes. I don't know, I whispered. And that answer told me everything. You cannot stay in a life where you don't even know what you want anymore. That night, I packed a small suitcase, just clothes, toiletries, a notebook, a set of paintbrushes I had not touched in years. I didn't plan to leave forever, just to breathe, to think, to remember who I was without constant emotional labor. When Imran saw the suitcase, his face crumbled. "You're really going?" he asked. I nodded. "I need space." Sarah stood in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "Ami?" I knelt and hugged her tightly. "I love you more than anything." Her little arms wrapped around my neck, and I promised myself silently that I would never again teach her to stay in a life that erased her. I went to my mother's house. She didn't ask questions. She just held me while I cried into her shoulder like I was a child again. In the days that followed, something strange happened. Without cooking for Imran, I discovered foods I liked again. Without managing his moods, I felt my own emotions rise to the surface. Without constant vigilance, my body relaxed. One afternoon, I picked up a paintbrush. My hands trembled at first. Then color flowed onto canvas. A messy sunset, bold strokes, fierce orange and red. And as I painted, I felt something return. Not love for him, not anger toward him, but love for myself. The woman who had disappeared was slowly walking back home. And I knew, deep in my bones, that no matter what happened next, I could never go back to being small again. Living at my mother's house felt strange at first. I was back in the room where I had slept as a teenager, posters long removed, walls freshly painted, but the air still carrying echoes of the girl I used to be. Every morning, sunlight came through the same window where I once sat dreaming about my future. Now I was here again, rebuilding one. My mother never pushed. She didn't lecture. She didn't say, "I told you so." She simply placed tea beside me each morning and asked, "Did you sleep?" Some days I did. Some days I didn't. Healing is not a straight road. It's a messy, looping path where you feel strong one moment and shattered the next. Sarah called every evening. At first, she sounded confused. "When are you coming home?" she asked. I told her, "Soon, sweetheart. Ami just needs a little time." Over days, her voice softened. She started telling me about school again, about her friends, about small dramas that mattered deeply to her. And I realized that children adapt faster than adults give them credit for, as long as they feel loved. Imran called too. At first, his voice was shaky. He asked if I was eating, if I was okay, if I needed money. I answered politely but briefly. Then one day he said, "The house feels empty without you." I didn't respond immediately, because once those words would have pulled me back instantly. Once his loneliness would have mattered more than my pain. Then now I said, "I hope you're reflecting, Imran, not just missing comfort." He went silent, then quietly said, "I am." Weeks passed. I began taking small steps. I enrolled in a short art course at a local center. The first day, I almost didn't go. I told myself I was too old, too out of practice, too nervous, but I forced myself through the door. And when I sat at that desk with other women dipping brushes into paint, something inside me loosened. Nobody there knew my story. Nobody knew I was a betrayed wife. I was just Nadia, a woman painting flowers badly and laughing at her own mistakes. After class, one of the women said, "You have a strong sense of color." I smiled, genuinely for the first time in years. At home, I started journaling, things I had never said out loud, writing letters I never planned to send, writing to Imran, writing to myself, writing to the woman I had been before marriage. With every word, I untangled more of the knot inside me. One evening, as I washed dishes beside my mother, she said, "You're coming back to life." I looked at her surprised. She smiled. "I've been watching you. Your eyes have light again." Tears came to my eyes, but this time they weren't only sad tears, they were recognition. Yes, I was returning. But healing is never simple. One afternoon, Emran came to visit Sarah. He knocked on my mother's door, nervous, holding a bag of her favorite sweets. When I saw him, my stomach twisted in ways I didn't expect. Not love, not anger, just memory. He sat in the living room, playing with Sarah, listening to her chatter. He looked human. Not the villain of my story, not the hero either, just a man who made choices and lived with consequences. After Sarah went to play in the other room, he looked at me. "I've been going to therapy alone," he said. "I needed to understand why I did what I did, why I didn't see your pain sooner." I listened quietly. "I'm not asking you to come back," he continued. "I just want you to know I see you now. I see what staying cost you." Something warm and heavy settled in my chest. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just acknowledgement. "I'm glad you're working on yourself," I said, "for Sarah, for your future, but I'm still finding me." He nodded. "I understand." When he left, I stood by the door long after it closed, not grieving, not relieved, just aware that a chapter was ending gently instead of with explosions. Days later, Sarah asked, "Ami, are you and Abu getting divorced?" Children always ask the question you're trying to avoid. I sat beside her on the bed. I said, "We haven't decided everything yet, but what matters is that we both love you, and that will never change." She thought for a moment. "Are you happier here?" I looked into her eyes, honest eyes, and I answered honestly, "I'm learning to be." She nodded as if that was enough. That night, I realized something vital. Staying after betrayal had not only hurt me, it had taught my daughter that love means enduring pain silently, and leaving was teaching her that self-respect matters. I wasn't just rebuilding myself, I was rewriting what love meant in our family. One morning, I woke up early. I sat on the floor with my paints. I painted a woman standing on a cliff, hair blowing wildly, ocean beneath her, sunrise ahead, strong colors, bold lines, no fear. When I finished, I signed my name at the corner. Nadia, not Imran's wife, not Sarah's mother, just me. And as I looked at the painting, I whispered, "I'm back." Not fully, not perfectly, but truly. And I knew the next step was coming, the hardest step, the one where I would decide whether to return to the life I left or build a new one entirely. The woman who once stayed after betrayal was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who would never disappear again. The decision didn't come all at once. It arrived quietly, in pieces, over ordinary days. One morning, I stood in front of the mirror tying my scarf before heading to class. My hands moved confidently, my eyes met my own reflection, and suddenly I realized I no longer looked like a woman waiting for permission to exist. I looked like someone choosing her life. That same afternoon, my mother handed me an envelope. "Courier came," she said. It was from a law office. Imran's handwriting was on the corner. "Please read when you're ready." My chest tightened, but not in panic. I opened it slowly. Inside were papers for an amicable separation agreement. No threats, no blame, fair financial arrangements, shared custody plans, a note attached in his careful handwriting. "I will not fight you. I will not control you. Whatever you decide, I accept. Thank you for the years you gave our family. I am sorry I didn't see you sooner." I sat down on the edge of the bed and read it again. Strangely, I felt calm. This was not the dramatic ending I once imagined. No shouting, no courtroom battles, no public humiliation. Just two adults acknowledging that something had broken beyond repair. And maybe that was its own kind of dignity. That night, I told Sarah we were going for a walk. We held hands as we walked through the park where Imran had once proposed to me. She swung our joined arms back and forth. "Ami, if you and Abu live in different houses, will I still see both of you?" "Yes," I promised. "You'll have two homes, double the love." She smiled. "Then it's okay." Children don't need perfect families. They need honest ones. Later, after she fell asleep, I sat alone under the stars. I thought of the years I stayed after the affair, how I shrank, how I convinced myself endurance was loyalty, how I wore silence like jewelry and called it strength. But I knew better now. Staying after betrayal had cost me myself. Leaving was teaching me who I could become. The next morning, I signed the papers. My hand didn't shake. When Imran came to collect them, we sat across from each other one last time as husband and wife. He looked tired, wiser, different. He said, "I hope you find happiness." I replied, "I hope you do too." And we meant it. As he walked away down the front steps, I didn't cry. I watched him go with quiet acceptance, gratitude for what had been, release for what could never be again. Inside the house, Sarah was drawing at the table. She looked up. "Is it done?" I nodded. "Yes, sweetheart." She got up, wrapped her arms around me, and said, "Then we start our new story." I held her close. Yes, a new story. Weeks passed. Life settled into a new rhythm. Sarah spent weekends with her father. I worked part-time at the art center, teaching beginner painting classes. My students were mostly women like me, women who had lived, lost, loved, endured. We laughed, we shared tea, we painted our feelings into color. One afternoon, after class, a student said, "You have a gift for making people feel safe." I smiled because I knew exactly what she meant. I had learned how to rebuild safety from the ruins of my own heart. One evening, I hung my cliff painting in the living room. Sarah looked at it. "That's you," she said. I nodded. "Yes." "Where are you going in the picture?" I thought for a moment. "Forward," I answered. "Always forward." She grinned. "Then I'm going with you." I laughed and kissed her forehead. And in that moment, I understood the true ending of my story. Not revenge, not reunion, not bitterness, but rebirth. I stayed after the affair and lost myself, but I left and found her again, stronger, wiser, whole. And this time, I was never letting her go. I thought the hardest part would be leaving. I was wrong. The hardest part was learning how to live after leaving. The first weekend Sarah went to stay with Imran in his new apartment, I stood in the doorway holding her backpack while she bounced on her toes with excitement. I kissed her cheeks, fixed her hair, reminded her to brush her teeth, and told her to call me if she missed me. She waved happily as Imran lifted her into the car. They drove away, and suddenly the house was silent. Not peaceful silent, hollow silent. I walked from room to room as if searching for something I'd misplaced. Her crayons on the table, her tiny socks in the laundry basket, her half-finished puzzle on the floor. Every corner of the house whispered her name. I sat on the couch and stared at the blank television screen. I realized I had no idea what to do with myself. For years, my identity had been wrapped around being a wife and mother. When the wife role died, the mother role still remained, but now shared. And that meant I had empty hours, long ones, quiet ones, hours where the noise of my own thoughts became too loud. I made tea. I didn't drink it. I scrolled through my phone. I didn't read anything. I just existed, floating. That night, I slept on my side of the bed. The other side remained untouched, cold, empty. Not because I missed Imran, but because my body had grown used to filling only half of itself. I lay awake until dawn, listening to my own heartbeat, steady and lonely. In the morning, I woke up and did something radical. I opened the curtains. Sunlight poured in, dust danced in the beams. The room looked different under full light, less haunted, more real. I cleaned, not the frantic cleaning of a desperate housewife trying to control chaos, but slow, deliberate cleaning. I changed the sheets, I moved the furniture, I washed the windows, I rearranged the living room so the couch no longer faced the empty chair where Imran used to sit. I placed my painting where his framed family photo once hung. By evening, the house felt unfamiliar, and somehow that helped. When Sarah returned Sunday night, she ran inside telling me stories about cartoons and pizza and how Abu let her stay up late. I listened with a smile, even when my chest tightened a little. After she slept, I sat beside her bed and realized something important. This wasn't a broken home. It was simply a different one. Weeks rolled forward. My art classes grew. I started earning my own money again. The first time I paid a bill with money I earned alone, I stared at the receipt like it was a trophy. Independence is quiet. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It arrives in small victories. One afternoon, I ran into my sister Nadia at the market. We hadn't spoken since the day everything collapsed. She looked thinner. Her eyes darted nervously when she saw me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "I heard about the separation," she said softly. I nodded. "Yes." "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for everything." I looked at her, really looked at her, not as the villain of my story, not as the sister who shattered my world, just a woman carrying her own mistakes. "I forgave you a long time ago. Not for you, for me." Tears filled her eyes. "I don't deserve that." "No," I replied gently, "but I deserved peace." She nodded, ashamed, and walked away. And I felt nothing heavy follow her departure. Forgiveness isn't saying what happened was okay, it's refusing to carry poison any longer. That night, I told Sarah we were baking cookies. Flour dust covered the kitchen. We laughed when the first batch burned. She licked the spoon and grinned at me. "Ami, you're happier now," she said casually. I froze for a moment. Children see truths adults hide. "Do you think so?" I asked. She nodded. "Before, you were always tired inside your eyes." I hugged her tight. "I'm trying, sweetheart." She said, "I like this version of you." So did I. Months passed, seasons changed, my hair grew longer, my laughter came easier. I started wearing colors again instead of the muted shades I once hid behind. I accepted invitations, I went for walks, I made friends outside of marriage circles, women who spoke of dreams instead of endurance. One evening after class, I sat on a bench watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. I realized I hadn't thought about the affair in weeks, not with rage, not with grief, just a distant memory, a chapter, not the whole book. My phone buzzed, a message from Imran. "Sarah lost her first tooth today. She wants to show you." A photo arrived, Sarah smiling, gap-toothed and proud. I laughed. I replied with heart emojis and praise. No bitterness, no longing, just shared parenthood. Balanced, respectful. We had become something new, not lovers, not enemies, just two people who once loved, now raising a child with mutual care. And I was okay. I stood up from the bench and whispered to myself, I am whole. Not because life was perfect, but because I was no longer abandoning myself to keep someone else. I walked home under the evening sky, knowing my story hadn't ended with betrayal. It had begun with self-rescue. There's a strange moment in healing that nobody talks about. The moment when you stop being the victim of the story and become the author of it. It happened for me on a rainy afternoon. Sarah was at school. My class had been canceled. I sat by the window watching raindrops race down the glass. I realized I felt peaceful, not happy in a loud way, not excited, just settled. And that scared me a little, because for so long pain had been my companion. I didn't know who I was without it. So I did something bold. I opened a blank notebook and wrote at the top of the page, my story in my own words. And I began to write. Not about Imran, not about Nadia, but about me, the girl who once loved painting, the woman who paused her dreams to build a family, the wife who stayed after betrayal, the mother who chose dignity over desperation, the person who walked out of a life that no longer fit. As the pen moved, tears dropped onto the paper. But they weren't bitter tears. They were release. When Sarah came home, she found me smiling. "What are you writing?" she asked, climbing onto my lap. "Our story," I said, "so we never forget how strong we are." She touched the notebook with tiny fingers. "Can I draw in it too?" "Of course." And suddenly the notebook became a living thing, words and drawings, memories and hopes, proof that life continues. A few weeks later, I received an email from the Arts Center director. "We're hosting a small exhibition for local artists. Would you like to display your work?" I stared at the screen. My heart pounded. The old voice of doubt whispered, "Who do you think you are?" But a newer voice spoke louder. "I am someone who survived." I replied, "Yes, I'd be honored." The night of the exhibition, I wore a blue dress, not for anyone else, for myself. Sarah held my hand as we walked into the gallery. My paintings hung on white walls under soft lights. People stopped, looked, appreciated, asked questions. One woman stood in front of my cliff painting for a long time. It feels like standing on the edge of a new life, she said. I smiled. That's exactly what it is. Sarah tugged my arm. Ami, you're famous, she whispered. I laughed. Not famous, just visible. And that was enough. Later that night, after the gallery closed, Sarah fell asleep in the car. I drove home under quiet streets. I realized I wasn't driving away from anything anymore. I was driving toward myself. When we reached home, I carried her inside, tucked her into bed, and stood in the doorway watching her sleep. I felt gratitude for the strange path life had taken, not because betrayal was a blessing, but because I refused to let it be the end of me. The next morning, I received a message from a woman who had attended the exhibition. Your painting made me leave a marriage that was destroying me. Thank you. I sat down and held the phone to my chest. My pain had become someone else's permission to heal. And I understood then, my story was never just mine. It was a lantern for others walking in the dark. I made tea and stood by the window again. This time the rain had stopped. Sunlight broke through clouds. The world smelled clean. I whispered to myself, you didn't just survive, you transformed. I stayed after the affair and lost myself, but I found something greater in the leaving, my voice, my worth, my life. And for the first time in a long time, I was truly free. I didn't expect the past to test me again, but healing is never a straight line. It curves, it circles. It sometimes asks, are you sure you're done with this lesson? It happened on a quiet Saturday morning. Sarah was at her father's for the weekend. I was cleaning the kitchen when my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Layla? A hesitant voice asked. I knew that voice. Nadia. My sister. For a moment I couldn't speak. My hand tightened around the phone. Memories rushed in, her laughter in our childhood room, sharing bangles, whispering secrets under blankets. And then the later image I tried so hard to forget. The affair, the betrayal, the way she disappeared from my life without apology. I heard about your exhibit, she said softly. I saw pictures online. Your work is beautiful. Silence stretched between us. What do you want, Nadia? I finally asked. My voice was calm, surprising even me. She exhaled shakily. I wanted to apologize. I've wanted to for years. I didn't know how. I didn't think you'd ever speak to me again. I leaned against the counter. My heart beat slowly, steadily. No storm, no trembling, just presence. You hurt me, I said, not just as a sister, but as a human being. I lost myself because of what happened. I don't say that to blame you. I say it because it's the truth. She began to cry. I know, and I've lived with that guilt every day. My life didn't become what I thought it would. The man I chose, he never respected me, and I realized too late what I threw away. I closed my eyes. I didn't feel satisfaction, only a quiet understanding of how pain travels through people like inheritance. I'm not the same woman anymore, I told her. I've healed. I've rebuilt. I won't reopen old wounds, but I can listen. She asked if we could meet, just once, somewhere public, somewhere safe. I agreed. Not for her. For me, to prove that the past no longer owned me. We met at a small cafe. She looked older, softer, a little worn around the edges. When she saw me, her eyes widened, not with envy, with recognition of strength. I almost didn't come, she admitted. So did I said honestly. We sat, ordered tea, let the silence settle before words. She apologized again, without excuses, without self-defense, just truth. And I listened. I didn't forgive her instantly. Forgiveness is not a switch, it's a door you open when you're ready. But I told her something important. I don't carry anger anymore. Not for you, not for him. I left that behind. If we ever have a relationship again, it will be new, not built on the past. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Thank you for even giving me this chance. I nodded. I gave it to myself. When we left the cafe, I felt lighter, not because everything was fixed, but because I proved to myself I could face what once broke me without breaking again. That evening, Sarah returned from her father's house. She ran into my arms, talking about a movie they watched and ice cream they ate. I listened, smiling, stroking her hair. Later, after she slept, I stood at the balcony looking at the city lights. I thought about how many women stay after betrayal, not because they are weak, but because they hope love will return, because they fear loneliness, because society tells them endurance is virtue. I thought about how I stayed and disappeared inside that choice, and how leaving didn't destroy my family, it reshaped it. Imran and I had grown into respectful co-parents. We spoke without bitterness. Sarah was thriving, laughing, secure, loved. And I had a life that belonged to me. Months passed. My painting classes expanded. I rented a small studio. Women came not just to learn art, but to talk, to breathe, to feel seen. We called it the open window. One day, a new student arrived, nervous, quiet, wearing a wedding ring she kept twisting with anxious fingers. After class, she lingered. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "How did you find the courage to leave?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and I said, "I didn't find courage. I found myself. And once I did, leaving became the only way to honor her." Her eyes filled. She nodded slowly. Another lantern lit. That night, Sarah sat beside me on the couch, flipping through our notebook of words and drawings. Ummi said, "Are you happy?" I didn't answer immediately, not because I didn't know, but because I wanted to answer honestly. "I'm peaceful," I said, "and peace grows into happiness." She smiled. "Then I'm happy too." I kissed her forehead. In bed later, I whispered into the quiet room. I stayed after the affair and lost myself, but I left and found a woman worth loving by me. And with that thought, I slept. Whole, complete, free. There is a quiet kind of strength that comes after everything loud has already happened. After the betrayal, after the leaving, after the rebuilding. It is the strength of a woman who no longer needs to prove she survived, because survival has become her normal. A year passed. Sarah grew taller, wiser, more curious about the world. She no longer asked why her father and I lived apart. It was simply our life, her life, and it was steady. Imran and I settled into an easy rhythm. He picked her up on Fridays. I sent her school projects in her backpack. We exchanged polite messages. Sometimes we even laughed about small parenting mishaps. One evening, while he waited at the door, he glanced at the painting hanging in my living room. "The cliff," he said quietly. "I remember when you first painted that." I nodded. "You look different now. Not on the outside, in your eyes." I smiled gently. I finally came home to myself. He lowered his gaze. "I'm glad you did." And for the first time, I felt compassion for him without attachment, without longing, without resentment. Just two people who once shared a life, now sharing respect. When he left with Sarah, I closed the door and leaned against it. There was no emptiness, no ache, only space. And space is where new life grows. At the studio, the open window became more than an art class. It became a sanctuary. Women brought their stories, their silent hurts, their dreams folded away in old drawers. We painted sunsets, storms, mountains, open roads. We painted ourselves into existence again. One afternoon, the nervous woman with the twisting wedding ring returned. This time, her ring was gone. "I left," she whispered. I didn't hug her. I didn't congratulate her. I simply poured her tea and sat beside her. Because I knew leaving is not the finish line. It is the first step of a long road. And she needed company, not celebration. As we sipped tea, I realized something. My pain had become purpose. Not because pain is good, but because I refused to waste it. That night, Sarah and I cooked dinner together. She stirred the pot while telling me about school. I watched her, thinking of the cycle I had broken. She would grow up knowing love is not endurance of harm. She would know a woman's worth is not measured by how much she tolerates. She would know that staying is not always strength, and leaving is not always failure. After dinner, she curled beside me on the couch. "Ami, do you think you'll ever get married again?" I laughed softly. "I don't know." "Would you want to?" I thought for a moment. "I want peace," I said. "If love ever comes again and fits into my peace, I'll welcome it. If not, I'm still whole." She smiled, satisfied with that answer. Children understand truth when we speak it simply. Later, after she slept, I stood at the balcony again. The same city, the same stars, but a different woman looking up at them. I thought about the title of my life's chapter. I stayed after the affair and lost myself, but the rest of the sentence was mine to write. I left and found myself. I healed and built anew. I rose and became my own home. I whispered into the night, not as a confession, but as a vow. I will never abandon myself again, for love, for fear, for anyone. A soft wind brushed my face like agreement. Inside, the home was quiet, safe, mine. And for the first time in my life, I understood that real love, the truest love, begins with the woman in the mirror. Always. There are moments in life that feel small on the outside, but inside they are revolutions. Mine came on an ordinary Tuesday. Sarah had gone to school. The studio was quiet. I stood in front of a blank canvas holding a brush, unsure what to paint. For years, my paintings had been born from pain, survival, transformation. But now, I was no longer fighting to exist. I was simply existing. And that was unfamiliar territory. I dipped the brush in warm gold paint and dragged it across the canvas. Light, sunrise, beginning. I didn't plan it. I let my hand move the way my heart felt. Free. As I painted, I realized this was the first canvas I was creating not to heal something broken, but to celebrate something whole. When it was finished, I stepped back. A horizon, a road leading forward. No cliff, no storm, just possibility. I named it Enough. That evening, the Art Center director called. "We've had incredible feedback from your workshop," she said. "Would you consider running a full-time program, a permanent space, a funded project?" I sat down slowly. A permanent space, a dream I once buried under laundry baskets and silent suffering. "Yes," I said, "I would." After the call, I walked to Sarah's room. She was doing homework, tongue slightly out in concentration. I sat beside her. "Sweetheart," I said, "we're going to have our own big studio soon, a real one." She looked up. "With big windows?" "Yes, big windows." "So people can see the light inside," she said. I laughed, but my eyes stung because she understood more than I ever taught her. On opening day of the studio, women filled the space. Laughter, chatter, the smell of paint and tea. On the wall hung my newest painting, Enough. A reporter from a local paper asked, "What inspired this project?" I paused, then answered simply, "A woman who lost herself and decided to come home." That night, after everyone left, I turned off the lights, locked the door, and stood in the quiet. A studio, my studio, built from a life that once felt ruined. I thought of the woman I used to be, the one who stayed after the affair, shrinking herself to save something already broken. If I could speak to her now, I'd say, "You won't die from this. You will grow." I drove home. Sarah was asleep. I tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "We made it." In the mirror before bed, I looked at my reflection, not searching for approval, not scanning for flaws, just witnessing. "I stayed after the affair," I said softly, "and I lost myself. But I found a life bigger than the one I lost." Tears slipped down, but they were warm, full, human. I turned off the light and lay down. Tomorrow would come, with its own worries, its own joys, its own quiet battles. But I was ready, because I was no longer surviving my life. I was living it, and I was enough. The final lesson came quietly. No dramatic phone call, no confrontation, no collapse. Just a mirror and a morning. I woke before sunrise, as I often did now. The house was still. The kind of stillness that once frightened me because it reminded me of loneliness, but now it felt like peace holding its breath. I made tea and stood by the window, watching the sky slowly lighten. Somewhere in the distance, a bird began to sing, soft at first, then louder, braver. I thought about how many women wake up every day beside someone who broke them, telling themselves they stayed for love, for family, for stability. And I thought about how I once did the same. How I stayed after the affair, hoping loyalty would heal betrayal. How I poured myself into forgiveness until there was nothing left of me. I finally understood something simple and powerful. Love that costs you yourself is not love. It is erasure. And healing is not about fixing what broke you. It is about refusing to disappear again. Sarah woke and padded into the kitchen in her slippers, rubbing her eyes. "Ami, why are you smiling so early?" I crouched and hugged her. "Because I'm grateful. For you. For this life. for today." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I'm grateful too." We ate breakfast together. I braided her hair for school. She kissed my cheek before leaving. Ordinary moments, sacred moments. At the studio later, sunlight poured through the large window Sarah once imagined. Women laughed, painted, talked, lived, and I moved among them, not as a savior, not as a guru, but as proof that rebuilding is possible. A new painting hung at the entrance now, a woman standing upright, brush in hand, surrounded by light. I called it, "I Stayed, I Lost, I Found." Visitors often paused before it. Some cried, some smiled, some whispered, "That's me." And each time I silently answered, "Yes, it can be you." That evening, Imran dropped Sarah off. As he turned to leave, he said, "You've built something beautiful, Layla." I nodded. "I built myself first." He smiled. That was the hardest part. He was right. After Sarah slept, I sat on the balcony once more. Same city, same stars. But now I knew this chapter was complete. Not because everything was perfect, but because I was no longer running from my life. I was choosing it. I stayed after the affair and lost myself, but I left and found my worth. I healed and built a home inside my own heart. I rose and became whole. And if my story ever reaches another woman sitting in silence, wondering whether she can survive her heartbreak, let her know this: you may lose yourself in staying, but you can always choose to return. I closed my eyes, breathed in the night air, and whispered the final truth of my journey. I am here. I am enough. And I am free.